What happened when an undercover CEO posed as a homeless man and the janitor who helped him got fired the next day. You won't believe what came next. Hello to all you wise, compassionate souls tuning in. Your heart for justice and love for meaningful stories is exactly why you're here. Today's tale is about quiet strength, resilience, and one woman who turned a moment of cruelty into a legacy of hope. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, this one's for you. Get ready for a powerful journey where kindness becomes the key to exposing corruption and changing lives forever. Elaine Bishop had scrubbed the same linoleum floors at Ocean View Senior Living Center for 28 years. She knew every creak in the hallway, every humming radiator, and every resident's birthday by heart, even the ones whose families had long stopped visiting. At 62, her knees ached more than they used to, and her back protested each time she bent to clean under a bed. But Elaine never complained. This place had become her sanctuary, a place where quiet acts of service spoke louder than titles. The residents, many in their 80s and 90s, saw her not as the janitor, but as someone who listened, who remembered their stories, who refilled their water pitchers without being asked. But lately, even that sense of purpose felt fragile. Ever since the new operations director, Colin Draper, arrived with his pressed suits and spreadsheet mind, things had started to change. The warmth was thinning, the staff were told to optimize time, conversations with residents were discouraged unless medically necessary, smiles began to feel like luxuries. Elaine tried to stay out of the way. She wasn't confrontational. She still brewed extra tea for Mrs. Kinney, who swore it helped her arthritis, and helped Mr. Abel find his slippers each morning. But she knew the writing was on the wall. New management didn't value people like her. That's why, when she stepped outside near the loading dock one rainy evening and spotted a man curled up under a broken patio umbrella, something in her heart twisted. He looked older, though it was hard to tell under the dirt and tangled beard. His hands shook. He didn't beg. He didn't even notice her at first. Elaine hesitated. The policy was clear: no contact with unauthorized individuals. She could lose her job for even speaking to him, but the man looked so cold, so forgotten, and she knew that feeling too well. Quietly, she disappeared into the kitchen, filled a thermos with hot tea, and brought him a blanket from the storage closet. "Here," she whispered, crouching beside him. "Just for tonight, okay?" He looked up, startled, but said nothing. He just nodded and wrapped himself in the warmth she offered. Elaine didn't ask for his name. She didn't need to. Sometimes you help someone not because it's allowed, but because it's right. She walked away quickly, hoping no one saw her. But someone did. And by morning, Elaine Bishop, faithful, quiet Elaine, would find herself erased from the very place she had given her life to. The morning after Elaine had offered warmth and tea to the man outside, the hallways of Ocean View felt colder than usual. The sun filtered weakly through the narrow windows, casting pale lines across the linoleum she had polished every day for nearly 3 decades. Elaine entered through the staff entrance with her usual quiet smile and a thermos of coffee in hand. But something was off. The nurses didn't meet her gaze. The receptionist gave her a tight, uncertain nod. Even Jamie, the young CNA who usually waved cheerfully, only offered a subdued glance. Elaine's heart thudded. Something had happened. She didn't wait long to find out. At 8:07 a.m.e., her name was called over the intercom. "Elaine Bishop, please report to Mr. Draper's office immediately." The words were clipped and sterile. She wiped her hands on her cleaning cloth, steadied her breath, and walked down the administrative hallway. Colin Draper stood by the window, arms folded tightly, a file folder on his desk. He didn't offer a greeting, just turned and said, "You know why you're here." Elaine blinked, uncertain. "I don't believe I do." He slapped the file onto the desk and flipped it open. A grainy black and white photo sat atop the stack. Elaine kneeling beside the man outside, her hand offering the thermos. "Security footage," he said, his voice sharp. "Taken last night at 9:17 p.m. Elaine's stomach dropped. "He was cold," she said quietly. "He looked sick. You broke protocol," Colin interrupted. You exposed the residence to an unscreened outsider. You accessed supply closets without authorization, and you fed him using facility resources. She tried to speak, but her throat felt tight. It was just one blanket, a bit of tea. That's not the point, he snapped. You know the rules. Elaine gripped the edge of the chair in front of her, her knuckles pale. So compassion's a fireable offense now? Colin didn't answer. Instead, he picked up her staff badge and lay it gently on the desk. You're dismissed, effective immediately. The words stung worse than she imagined. Not because of the job. She had never clung to titles or paychecks, but because it meant being erased from the lives she had touched, from the people who relied on her without even realizing it. She stepped out into the hallway, heart pounding, trying to hold her head high. Jamie stared at her from down the corridor, her eyes wide with disbelief. Elaine gave a small nod of reassurance, but inside she was crumbling. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves scattered across the walk as she passed through the gate one final time. She had given everything to this place, her strength, her care, her heart. And now, for one act of kindness, she was gone. Elaine sat at her kitchen table the next morning, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug that had once been part of a wedding gift set. The silence in her small apartment was unsettling. For nearly 30 years, her mornings had begun with the rustle of medical carts and the quiet murmurs of residents asking for help finding their slippers or sharing their dreams from the night before. Now there was nothing. No place to be, no one who needed her. The world moved on without notice, as if her decades of service had vanished with the swing of one office door. The shame of it burned deep, not because she'd broken a rule, but because it felt like the entire meaning of her quiet life had been tossed out like one of the soiled linens she used to launder with care. She was jolted from her thoughts by a soft knock at the door. Startled, she rose and opened it. No one stood there. Only a manila envelope rested on the welcome mat, her name written across it in elegant, steady handwriting. Elaine Bishop. No return address, no postage, just the weight of something unexpected. Frowning, she picked it up and opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored paper folded into thirds. As she unfolded it, her eyes widened. Elaine, I owe you an explanation. Meet me at Ocean View at noon. WWX. Her breath caught in her throat. The initials meant nothing to her at first, until, like a thunderclap, a name from the past surged forward. Wesley Grant, the founder and original owner of Ocean View, a man she hadn't seen in over a decade. Rumor was, he'd sold his shares and retired to the coast. Others whispered that he'd grown disillusioned with the industry he helped build. What could he possibly want with her? Elaine turned the letter over, searching for clues, but there were none. Just her name, a time, and an odd stirring in her gut, the kind of deep, instinctive feeling she'd learned not to ignore. After everything that had happened, this could be nothing, or it could be the beginning of something she never saw coming. She placed the letter gently on the table and reached for her coat. Noon wasn't far off, and whatever waited for her at Ocean View, she would face it with the same quiet resolve she'd brought to every hallway, every mess, every forgotten soul she'd ever served. When Elaine walked back through the front doors of Ocean View just before noon, the atmosphere felt different. Not tense exactly, but watchful. Familiar faces turned in slow surprise. Some stared, others whispered. She wasn't in uniform this time. No cleaning cart, no badge, just a soft navy sweater, slacks, and her modest leather purse hanging from her shoulder. She was escorted, not to the janitor's closet, but straight into the main conference room where Mr. Wesley Grant waited. The man looked different than the legend in faded photos. Older, yes, but alert and piercing, with silver hair slicked back and eyes that missed nothing. He rose when she entered. You didn't serve a homeless man last week, Elaine, he said, gently. You served me. The words struck like a bell in a cathedral, sharp and sacred. Elaine sat slowly, processing. Wesley explained his absence, his disillusionment with how Ocean View had evolved in his time away. He had come back in disguise, not to test policy, but to test people. Elaine had passed. Colin Draper had failed. And now Mr. Grant was offering her something she never imagined. A return, not as a janitor, but as Director of Resident Wellness. A new position with full authority to rebuild Ocean View's human soul. Word spread quickly. By afternoon, the entire staff had heard. Some were thrilled. Jamie Lynn, the young CNA, hugged Elaine fiercely and whispered, "It should have been you all along." Others were less welcoming. One orderly muttered, "She was sweeping floors last week, now she's running the place." A group of administrators exchanged stiff smiles with her but avoided eye contact. Even a few nurses, older than Elaine herself, looked uneasy. It wasn't just about hierarchy, but it was about change. And change, especially in a place so deeply routine, is rarely embraced without resistance. Elaine felt the weight of every gaze. But she didn't flinch. Her first meeting as director was short and soft-spoken. "I'm not here to make enemies," she said, "but I am here to make this place feel like home again, for everyone." She implemented small changes first, turning the break room TV back on during shifts, reinstating afternoon music in the resident halls, and setting up a suggestion box for anonymous staff input. She wasn't just trying to be liked. She was listening, watching, learning, because what mattered most wasn't how quickly they followed her. It was how deeply they trusted her when the time came to choose. And the time was coming faster than she thought. Elaine's reforms, though modest, began to ripple through Ocean View in ways she hadn't expected. A few residents who'd grown listless under the old regime started smiling again. Staff lingered longer with patience. Afternoon group sing-alongs returned, filling the halls with out-of-tune voices and reluctant laughter. For a moment, it felt like maybe, just maybe, she was making progress. But beneath that progress, something darker was stirring. 1 week after her return, a wave of complaints surfaced. Anonymous emails to the state's Elder Care Oversight Board, online reviews accusing Ocean View of unsanitary conditions, staff negligence, and even claims of verbal abuse by new management. The reviews were filled with half-truths and outright lies. Elaine read each one carefully, her stomach sinking with every paragraph. Families began pulling their loved ones from the facility. A longtime resident's daughter arrived in tears, apologizing as she transferred her mother to another home. "I just can't take the risk," she said. Elaine could only nod, watching another room fall empty. She knew exactly who was behind the smear campaign. Colin Draper. Though officially on leave, he still had allies inside, and his fingerprints were all over the chaos. But Elaine had no proof, and without it, her accusations would only make her look desperate. Then came the worst blow of all. On a gray Tuesday morning, 2 inspectors from the state arrived unannounced. "We've received multiple complaints," one said briskly, clipboard already out. "We'll need to do a full walkthrough." Elaine walked with them, heart pounding as they moved through the halls, the kitchen, the laundry room. Everything was spotless. Until they reached the medication storage. One of the inspectors opened a refrigeration unit and froze. Inside, a tray of medication packets, meant to be temperature-controlled, sat half a spile, the printed labels smeared with condensation. "This is a serious violation," the inspector said sternly. "Who logged this batch?" The clipboard was flipped, the name written in faint blue ink, Elaine Bishop. She stared at it, stunned. That wasn't her handwriting. That tray hadn't been there yesterday. But the damage was done. "We'll be filing a formal notice," the inspector said. "This could result in a temporary shutdown pending review." Elaine could barely hear them. Her thoughts were spinning. It was too perfect, too coordinated. Colin hadn't just spread lies, he had escalated to something worse. Sabotage. And now, not only was her job on the line, but the safety and future of Ocean View itself. For the first time since she accepted Mr. Grant's offer, Elaine felt real fear, not for herself, but for everything she had just begun to rebuild. She needed allies. She needed proof, and she needed it fast, before Colin's shadow erased Ocean View the same way it tried to erase her. Elaine didn't sleep that night. The image of the spoiled medication tray replayed in her mind over and over like a scene from a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. But by morning, the fear that had gripped her chest had hardened into something sharper. Resolve. She'd spent 3 decades keeping her head down, staying humble, doing the right thing, and now someone was trying to use that humility against her. But Elaine Bishop wasn't naive. She might not be tech-savvy or politically connected, but she had something just as powerful, experience, and she knew when a pattern smelled rotten. Her first stop was Kevin Myers, the part-time intern with a talent for computers and an eye for details others overlooked. She found him at the back of the media room, earbuds in, hunched over a half-repaired printer. "Kevin," she said gently, "how good are you at pulling old security footage?" He looked up, curious. "Depends on how old and where it's stored." Elaine explained everything, the sabotage, the planted meds, and how the log had her name forged. Kevin's eyes narrowed. "That's criminal," he muttered. "You think it's Draper?" Elaine nodded. "But I can't prove it. Not yet." Kevin got to work immediately, pulling security logs and scanning access records. Together, they discovered a window between 10 p.m. and midnight when motion was detected near the med room. The camera feed from that hallway, however, was conveniently corrupted. "Classic overwrite tactic," Kevin noted. Someone knew what they were doing. Elaine's jaw tightened. That confirmed it. Sabotage, not accident. She turned to Kevin, her eyes steady. "Then we do this the old-fashioned way. We bait him." Over the next 24 hours, Elaine quietly arranged a meeting one Colin Draper wouldn't be able to resist. She asked Jamie to casually mention around the facility that a group of families had requested a mediation meeting about the state complaints. "Tell them I'll be presenting a report," she said, "and that Mr. Grant will be in attendance." She knew Colin's pride wouldn't allow him to stay away. The plan wasn't without risk. Colin was clever and vengeful, but Elaine was playing the long game now. She had spent her life watching how people treated those they thought were beneath them, and now she would use that knowledge to let Colin trap himself. "You're gonna catch a rat," Kevin had said with a grin. Elaine smiled softly. "No," she replied. "He's gonna walk right into the cage. I'm just holding the door open." While the trap was quietly being prepared, Elaine poured her energy into what truly mattered, reclaiming Ocean View's soul from the inside out. She knew that catching Colin would solve a problem, but healing the place required more than removing a poison. It meant reviving the heart that had been slowly suffocated under policies, profit margins, and fear. So Elaine returned to what she did best, listening. She walked the halls during shift changes, not with orders, but with open ears. She asked the staff what they needed. "Time," some whispered. "Trust," said others. One nurse in her 50s teared up as she said, "I just want to stop feeling scared every time I make a decision." Elaine nodded. "Then we'll build that trust back together." She launched small, symbolic changes. Residents were invited to decorate the hallway with their own art and family photos. A dusty room near the back was repurposed into a reflection space, with soft chairs, music, and herbal tea. Break times were staggered to ensure coverage without exhaustion. Staff were encouraged to join weekly care circles, where they could speak freely without judgment or retaliation. For the first time in years, the break room buzzed not with gossip or complaint, but with laughter and camaraderie. Jamie, the young CNA, blossomed under Elaine's mentorship. "You make this place feel like it matters again," she said during one of their walks. Elaine smiled. "That's because it always mattered. We just forgot." Meanwhile, families began to take notice. One daughter left a handwritten thank you card. "For the first time in months, I don't feel guilty leaving my father here. Thank you for seeing him." Social media reviews turned upward as staff and visitors posted candid photos of residents smiling during bingo games, painting classes, and hallway sing-alongs. Elaine never bragged about these victories, but inside she felt each one like a stitch in a torn garment, slowly mending the damage. Yet as the light returned, so did the shadows. Colin had been seen near the facility again, just outside, never on property. One orderly mentioned seeing him sitting in a parked car, watching. Elaine didn't react. Let him watch. Let him see that Ocean View was not crumbling without him. It was breathing again. And soon, when he walked through the doors for the mediation meeting, she knew he couldn't resist. It wouldn't be the staff who feared his presence. It would be him. Realizing too late that everything he tried to destroy had already begun to thrive without him. The house had found its heartbeat again, and its heart, as it turned out, wore sensible shoes and carried a quiet, iron will named Elaine Bishop. The mediation meeting was scheduled for Friday evening just before the monthly family night potluck, an event that always drew a crowd. Caregivers, residents' families, volunteers, and even a local reporter from the town paper gathered in Ocean View's multi-purpose hall, the air buzzing with warm conversation and the scent of baked ziti and homemade cobbler. A folding table at the front held name placards and a microphone. Elaine stood to the side, dressed in a soft blazer and her late husband's gold pendant, a quiet symbol of the strength she carried with her. Jamie stood nearby, hands trembling slightly, but ready. Kevin, hidden in the audio booth, gave her a small thumbs up. Everything was in place. At 6:12 p.m., right on cue, Colin Draper walked in. He wore a sharp navy suit, his trademark smirk firmly in place, as if he were walking back into a kingdom he'd only temporarily loaned out. Several staff froze at the sight of him, but Elaine did not. She stepped forward, offered a cool nod, and gestured toward the front row. "Right this way, Mr. Draper." The meeting began like any other. Brief introductions, a few nervous family members airing concerns about the recent state inspection. Colin leaned back, arms crossed, clearly expecting to dominate the discussion. Then Elaine stepped to the microphone. "I want to thank you all for being here," she began, voice steady. "In the past few weeks, Ocean View has faced a number of challenges, from internal sabotage to false accusations. Tonight, it's time we talk about why." She nodded toward Kevin, who tapped a key. The room's aging projector screen blinked to life. At first there was only static, then security footage appeared. Though grainy, it clearly showed a man in a navy hoodie entering the med storage area late at night. Moments later, he placed a tray of medication on the shelf, glanced around, and quickly exited. The timestamp matched the night before the inspection. Gasps filled the room. Elaine took a breath. "That man," she said clearly, "is Colin Draper." Colin stood, face flushed. "That's absurd. You can't even see the face." Another video clip began to play, this time audio, a recorded conversation between Colin and someone off screen. "Don't worry," his voice said, smug and unmistakable. "She'll be out in a week. No one questions the guy with a clipboard and a badge. Let her rebuild the place. Then I'll burn it down and come back in as the hero." The room fell deathly silent. Leslie Grant stood next, his voice grave. "Mr. Draper has been terminated and permanently barred from this facility, and we've filed a report with the state for criminal misconduct." As security approached, Colin tried to protest, but the crowd had already turned against him. He didn't just lose his job, he lost the mask he'd hidden behind. Elaine had caught the rat, and this time there would be no escape hatch. 1 year later, Ocean View Senior Living Center didn't just look different, it felt different. Gone were the tense silences and clipped conversations that used to haunt the halls. In their place came soft music in the mornings, hand-painted murals along the corridors, and spontaneous hallway dances that residents proudly led. Care aides now stayed 5 minutes longer to chat, and family members lingered after visits. And in the very heart of it all, walking slowly through the garden she helped build, was Elaine Bishop. The once empty courtyard behind the facility had been transformed into a thriving community garden, complete with flower beds, wind chimes, and a circular bench under a weeping willow tree. Residents called it Elaine's Corner, though she never took credit. She said it belonged to everyone who believed in second chances. The facility had even been renamed the Grant Bishop Center for Compassionate Care, a gesture Wesley Grant insisted on after the board voted unanimously to honor both its founder and the woman who had restored its soul. Elaine didn't stay as director forever. A few months earlier, she'd approached Jamie Lynn in the reflection room and handed her a worn leather journal. "I've written down everything I've learned about people, patience, pain, and purpose," she said. Jamie's eyes filled with tears as she opened the first page. "Kindness isn't a tactic. It's a foundation." With that, Elaine formally passed the torch. Jamie, now in her early 30s, became Director of Resident Wellness, and Kevin was hired full-time as Ocean View's Digital Outreach Coordinator. Elaine's days now were quieter. She still came in each morning, not to manage, but to visit. She brewed tea with residents, listened to their stories, and held hands during doctor appointments. She still wore sensible shoes and cardigans with loose threads, and she still refused to sit while others worked. But now, her presence wasn't that of a worker in the background. It was a reminder of what true leadership looks like when it's rooted in service. As she stood beneath the willow tree one breezy afternoon, watching a group of residents paint birdhouses, Wesley joined her on the bench. "You know," he said, "when I came back, I thought I'd have to fix everything myself. But you did it better than I ever could have." Elaine smiled, her gaze distant but full. "I just reminded them what it feels like to be seen." And that was her legacy. Not a plaque on a wall or a title on paper, but a space where people felt safe to be human again. In a world that had once tried to discard her as outdated and invisible, Elaine Bishop had built something enduring, a home with a heart, and a legacy no one could erase. The story of Elaine Bishop teaches us that true leadership isn't about power, position, or policy. It's about heart. In a world that often overlooks the quiet, aging, and humble, Elaine proves that integrity, compassion, and lived experience are not just valuable, they're transformative. She was dismissed for an act of kindness, but it was that very kindness that revealed the rot beneath the surface and inspired real change. Her journey reminds us that doing the right thing may come at a cost, but it is never in vain. Even when it feels like no one notices, character shines through. Elaine didn't fight back with anger or pride. She listened, she watched, and she acted with wisdom and dignity. She rallied others, not with force, but by earning their trust. For older Americans especially, this story is a powerful affirmation. Your value doesn't fade with time. Your voice, your care, your experience, these are your legacy. Elaine reclaimed hers not through revenge, but through restoration.